This Sunday's verse comes from Ephesians chapter 4, verses 25 through 27. Verse 25. So then, putting away falsehood, let all of us speak the truth to our neighbors, for we are members of one another. Verse 26. Be angry, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. Verse 27. And do not make room for the devil. A good title for this passage is Rules for the New Life. Of course, the first and foremost is to love God, and then the next is to love our neighbor. But these verses from Ephesians are very good ones to live by also. And what do I mean by new life? In order to do this, we must be born again. See John 3, verse 3. So verse 25 again. So then, putting away falsehood, let all of us speak the truth to our neighbors, for we are members of one another. So, when it comes to putting away falsehood, aka lying, what does that mean? More than simply telling falsehoods, lying also includes exaggeration and adding fabrications to something that is true. Cheating, making foolish promises, betraying a confidence, and making false excuses are all forms of lying, which we as Christians should have no part in. Speak truth to our neighbor. Part of 20. This is quoted from Zechariah chapter 8, verse 16, which says, These are the things you are to do. Speak the truth to each other and render true and sound judgment in your courts. God's work in the world is based on truth, and neither the church nor individual believers can be fit instruments for the Lord if they are not truthful. Verse 26 again says, Be angry, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. So, be angry, but do not sin. This is quoted from Psalm 4, verse 4, which says, Tremble, and do not sin when you are on your beds. Search your hearts and be silent. Anger can be both a good and a bad thing, depending on the motive and purpose. There is such thing as a righteous anger, which is the kind that hates injustice, immorality, ungodliness, and every other sin. When we are angry in an unselfish way that is based on love for God and others, God not only allows that, but commands it. Jesus expressed righteous anger in Matthew chapter 21, verse 12, Mark 3, verses 4 through 5, and John chapter 2, verse 13 through 16. So Matthew 21:12 says, Then Jesus entered the temple and drove out all who were selling and buying in the temple, and he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. The reason why Jesus expressed righteous anger is answered in verse 13, which says, He said to them, It is written, My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a den of robbers. Mark 3, verses 4 through 5 says, Then he said to them, Is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to kill? But they were silent. He looked around at them with anger. He was grieved at their hardness of heart and said to the man, Stretch out your hand. He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees were trying to trap Jesus into doing work on the Sabbath day, hence the question Jesus asked them. John chapter 2, verse 13 through 16 says, The Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and the money changers seated at their tables. Making a whip of cords, he drove all of them out of the temple, both the sheep and the cattle. He also poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. He told those who were selling the doves, Take these things out of here. Stop making my Father's house a marketplace. So the part of verse 26 that says, Do not let the sun go down on your anger. Even righteous anger can turn into bitterness, so it should be set aside by the end of each day. If our anger is prolonged, it may become hostile and violate the instruction of Romans chapter 12, verses 17 through 21, which says, Do not repay anyone evil for evil, but take thought for what is noble in the sight of all. If it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave room for the wrath of God, for it is written, Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. No, if your enemies are hungry, feed them. If they are thirsty, give them something to drink. For by doing this you will heap burning coals on their heads. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So verse 27 again says, and do not make room for the devil. So when I read this the first time, I thought, how do we make room for the devil in our hearts? To name a few: fear, worry, doubt, evil thoughts, being around the wrong people, developing or participating in bad habits. You might have more to add to the list, but those are the first things that came to my mind. Evil thoughts begin in the mind. I believe that if we can control our thoughts from evil to loving and kind ones, that is the best way to keep evil away to start off with. If we stay close to God and actively seek Him and ask for His guidance, evil will not prevail. And when I read this also, I thought of a verse that that I am sure most people know about. And it's Psalm 23, verse 4. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. So our verses again this week, Ephesians chapter 4, verses 25 through 27. So then, putting away falsehood, let all of us speak the truth to our neighbors, for we are members of one another. Be angry, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and do not make room for the devil.